Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I am Tanvi Taneja. And for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in Washington, Nick Harper. Hi, Nick.
Good morning, Tanvi. It's 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. It's 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, support for Ukraine and criticism for China. NATO members gather for the final day of the alliance's annual summit, and discussions continue on a possible Israeli hostage deal. We've got the latest details, but first, the headlines.
Joe Biden's presidential campaign in question as more Democrats in Congress call on him to end his re-election bid. Biden to face the press in a high-stakes effort to quell his fitness and age concerns. As a NATO summit in Washington enters its final day, Hungary says Ukraine's admission to the bloc would weaken unity in the group. Russia says NATO's military infrastructure is incrementally moving towards its borders. NATO accuses China of enabling Russia to build weapons to attack Ukraine. Beijing wants the bloc against provoking a confrontation. So all eyes are on Joe Biden as more Democrats are calling on him to end his re-election bid. US President Joe Biden faced fresh doubts about his re-election chances from heavyweights Nancy Pelosi, actor George Clooney, who may influence other Democratic lawmakers and financial donors. And two Senate Democrats have also been added to this list. Hollywood star Clooney, a Democrat who co-hosted a star-studded fundraiser for Biden last month, withdrew his support with a damning opinion piece in the New York Times, saying that Biden was not the same man he was in 2020. Actor Michael Douglas also said that it would be hard to imagine President Biden serving his full term as president if he is re-elected. Douglas, who has previously fundraised for the president, said that he was disappointed at his inability to challenge all the lies of Donald Trump during his first debate. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, meanwhile, has privately signaled that he's open to a Democratic candidate other than Biden. Schumer, though, reiterated his support for Biden in a statement. Senator Peter Welch called on Biden to withdraw in an op-ed published late on Wednesday, the first Democratic senator to explicitly call for the president of the United States to step aside in his re-election bid. So it's the final day of the NATO summit in Washington. So far, leaders have pledged their support for Ukraine, and the draft communiqué reiterated support for Ukraine on its path to NATO membership. But Hungary thinks otherwise. My colleague Nick Harper is in Washington, D.C. He takes it forward from me here, gives us more on the NATO summit and other stories making headlines around the world. So, Nick, what is expected on the final day of the summit?
Well, plenty ahead, Tanvi, and a big day with big pledges expected. NATO leaders will end their summit on Thursday with a clear focus on backing Ukraine as US President Joe Biden faces growing calls from members of his own Democratic Party to drop his re-election bid. Biden will hold a rare solo news conference on Thursday where reporters are certain to question his candidacy in the November 5th presidential election, despite his hope to shift the narrative after a day surrounded by allied leaders. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will also hold a news conference with NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg on Thursday after meeting with both Republican and Democratic lawmakers at the US Capitol. Meanwhile, Hungary said that Ukraine's admission to NATO would weaken unity in the group. In comments on the sidelines of the NATO summit in Washington, Hungary's foreign minister also said it does not want NATO to become an anti-China bloc and will not support it doing so. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán met Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday to discuss a potential Ukraine peace deal, following visits to Kiev and Moscow. Meanwhile, the Kremlin said on Thursday it was watching as NATO's military infrastructure moved closer towards Russia's borders and that Moscow would need to act to contain the Western military alliance. A Russian news agency cited Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov as saying that NATO's goal was to suppress Russia and that the alliance's actions represented a serious threat to Russian national security. The United States and Germany have said in a joint statement on Wednesday that Washington will start deploying long-range fire capabilities in Germany in 2026 in an effort to demonstrate its commitment to NATO and European defence. China on Thursday criticised a draft communiqué from the NATO summit in Washington that described China as a decisive enabler of Russia's war effort in Ukraine, saying that those comments were biased and full of provocations. Speaking to reporters at a regular press briefing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Jin Lin said NATO hyped up China's responsibility in regards to the Ukraine crisis. Lin also accused NATO of playing up the tension in the Asia-Pacific region with a full-on Cold War mentality and belligerent rhetoric. Beijing put forward a 12-point paper more than a year ago that set out general principles for ending the conflict but did not get into specifics. Well, NATO's 32 members have pledged unwavering support for Ukraine. The bloc's chief, Jens Stoltenberg, said that NATO allies had collectively identified China as a decisive enabler of Russia's war.
In the way that this is a strong message from NATO allies that we really want Ukraine to join and that we are working with Ukraine to make that happen. Words are important and words creates expectation, creates an agenda, defines an ambition. But of course, as important as words, the language in the declaration is actually what we then have agreed to do. So in many ways, action speaks at least as loudly as words. So I think you need to understand the declaration with a reference to irreversible path to membership together with what we do. China provides dual-use equipment, microelectronics, a lot of other tools which are enabling Russia to build the missiles, to build the bombs, to build the aircraft, to build the weapons they are using to attack Ukraine.
Well, to get more on all of this and unpack some of the details, we're joined by DD India correspondent Benji Haya. He's joining us live from the NATO summit site here in Washington, D.C. Benji, lots of announcements, but it's also a huge day for Joe Biden. Are allied leaders and also his own Democratic Party looking for reassurances from the president that he's up to the job?
Nick, this NATO summit could hardly come at a more perilous time for this defence pact, the Russian war in Ukraine being one of its greatest security challenges. And yet at the same time, you have this situation being overshadowed by twin backgrounds, really. Yes, the focus on what needs to be done to safeguard Ukraine and its future and freedom. And at the same time, these growing questions, as you've explored just there, about Joe Biden's presidency. All told, these closely held discussions that have been taking place within the Democrat Party in the last 2 weeks or so are now pointing towards something that was at one stage considered a fantasy. the idea of trying to remove President Joe Biden from the ticket and force him to step aside as a nominee for November's presidential election. There is an attempt to try to steady the ship. President Joe Biden's team is back on Capitol Hill this morning, holding several meetings with lawmakers. Lawmakers, of course, some of whom have come out publicly against the president, saying that he should withdraw from this race. Here in NATO, later today, the president will actually be holding a press conference. That has been pushed now an hour from 5:30 to 6:30 local time, and that will be, Nick, a serious test, one of the most significant tests that he has faced since that, frankly, disastrous debate against President Donald Trump 2 weeks ago. Journalists, maybe even leaders from other countries, will be listening closely to what Joe Biden says and exactly how he says it.
And Benji, you mentioned Donald Trump there. Let's shift attention to him. He, of course, is a known NATO skeptic. How much concern is there at this NATO summit about the possibility of a second Trump presidency?
Well, Nick, Donald Trump is, of course, not here. He's not the leader of the United States, and yet, at least in this room, he happens to be the major elephant, and he is a name on many people's lips. You may be able to hear in the background kind of a loudspeaker system that over the course of the morning has been playing comments by world leaders from NATO member states. And, I've kept a keen eye as to what they have been asked, and it is dominated, Nick, frankly, by questions about Donald Trump and what he might do to this NATO alliance. He has in the past threatened to withdraw. He is more sceptical about giving more military aid to Ukraine. He wants other member states to increase their defence funding to at least 2% of GDP. And we've learnt this morning that should Donald Trump return to the White House, he is considering a reduction in intelligence sharing with members of NATO. Again, a key component of this defence pact that's existed for 75 years. In light of all that, it is perhaps no surprise that many of the leaders from different nations as part of NATO have gathered here in order to try to future-proof commitments vis-à-vis Ukraine and others, just in case there is a change of administration in the United States. But it must be said that the overwhelming focus will definitely be returning to Joe Biden, especially when he takes to the stage for that press conference later.
Yeah, that'll certainly be a big moment. Benji Hire joining us live from the summit site here in Washington, D.C. Thanks, Benji. Moving on to other news, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said that he's met with visiting US envoy Brett McGurk on Thursday to discuss progress in reaching a Gaza hostage release deal. According to a statement from his office, both leaders spoke about the delivery of critical munitions, some of which will be sent to Israel in the coming days. Meanwhile, Hamas, in a statement, said on Thursday that mediators have not yet provided the group with any updates regarding the Gaza ceasefire negotiations. It also accused Israel of stalling to gain time and thwart the current round of talks. Moving to France now, with a call from the coalition in France after elections there, left-winger Mathilde Panot says the president should stop monopolising power in Parliament. This after President Macron said in an open letter published in regional newspapers that mainstream parties with Republican values should form a governing coalition, and said that he hoped to pick a prime minister from such a grouping. Macron's Justice Minister, Éric Dupond-Moretti, defended the president's move, saying that it was the only way out of the gridlock for lawmakers from all sides, except the far right and the far left, and they had now to work together.
This is the unbelievable situation in which we found ourselves in. It's a form of legislative takeover that the president is currently doing. So he should stop monopolizing power, admit that he was defeated, and admit that we won.
Back to US news now, and Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin's trial has opened in the state of New Mexico. The prosecution and defense have painted starkly different pictures of the events leading up to the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins. Baldwin was pointing a gun at her during a rehearsal in 2021 on the film set when he fired a live round, killing her and wounding the film's director. Baldwin claims that he did not know the gun was loaded and did not pull the trigger. Prosecutors, though, say he acted recklessly and has changed his story multiple times. If found guilty, Baldwin faces up to 18 months in prison. It's unclear if he'll testify in his own defence. Well, that's it from me here in Washington. Tanvi, handing it back to you in the studio.
Nick Harper joining us all from Washington, D.C. You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar hosts second BIMSTEC Foreign Ministers Retreat in New Delhi. Says for India, BIMSTEC represents the intersection of neighbourhood first outlook, Act East policy and Saga vision. And Kenyan President William Ruto dismisses his entire cabinet apart from the foreign minister in the wake of nationwide anti-government protests.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. Embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Tanvi Taneja. India is hosting a two-day meeting of the foreign ministers of the BIMSTEC countries in New Delhi on Thursday. The retreat aims at bolstering cooperation among the Bay of Bengal nations. BIMSTEC, or the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, is a grouping of 7 countries of South and Southeast Asia for multifaceted cooperation.
At the second Foreign Ministers' Retreat of the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, or the BIMSTEC, India underlined the need for renewed commitment and enhanced cooperation amongst the member states.
There are long-standing goals such as capacity building and economic cooperation that have acquired a new urgency. BIMSTEC represents the intersection of the neighborhood first outlook, the Act East policy and the Saga vision. Our discussions in the first part will revolve around connectivity, institutional building, cooperation in trade and business, collaboration in health and space, digital public infrastructure, capacity building and societal exchanges, as well as weighing on the merits of new mechanisms.
These deliberations are pivotal as they set the stage for substantive outcomes at the upcoming BIMSTEC summit, scheduled later this year to be hosted by Thailand. Besides India, the BIMSTEC comprises of Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Nepal and Bhutan. India has been making concerted efforts to make the BIMSTEC a vibrant forum for regional cooperation for development and regional security. Amritpal Singh for DD India in New Delhi.
In preparation for India's Union Budget 2024, Prime Minister Narendra Modi convened a meeting with economists and sectoral experts in New Delhi on Thursday. The meeting, which also saw the participation of Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, was a key step as the government gears up to present its comprehensive budget for its third term on July 23rd. The pre-budget meeting was attended by notable figures including Niti Aayog Vice Chairman Suman Berry and other members of the planning body. The gathering was marked by in-depth discussions aimed at shaping the economic direction of the country for the coming fiscal year. This budget holds particular significance as it is said to be the first major economic document under the Modi 3.0 administration. More from Asia. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress of China, Zhao Leji, on Thursday on the sidelines of the BRICS Parliamentary Forum. Zhao Leji arrived in Russia this week and held meetings with the chamber leaders of Russian Parliament. Taiwan detected 66 Chinese military aircraft and vessels around the island on Thursday. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te said that China's threat to regional stability continues to increase. Taiwan's defense ministry has said that it was closely watching Chinese military movements after a surge in warplanes joined drills with China's Shandong aircraft carrier in the Pacific. The Chinese carrier passed close to the Philippines on its way to the Pacific exercises. Meanwhile, videos released by Taiwan's Coast Guard on Thursday showed what they said were Chinese Coast Guard ships entering prohibited waters around Taiwan's frontline islands of Kinmen. In response to the alleged intrusion of its waters, Taiwan said it dispatched 4 of its own Coast Guard vessels to conduct one-on-one monitoring alongside the 4 Chinese ships. Kinmen is a short boat ride from the Chinese cities of Xiamen and Guangzhou. And next we take a look at what else is happening around the world.
We have seen
Kenyan President William Ruto on Thursday dismissed his entire cabinet apart from the foreign minister in the wake of nationwide anti-government protests. At least 39 people were killed in clashes with the police and some demonstrators briefly stormed parliament last month. China's custom officials caught a man smuggling 104 live snakes in the pocket of his trousers. Officials said that 5 different species of snakes were identified, of which 3 were alien to China. An Indian Air Force contingent landed in Australia to take part in exercise Pitch Black 2024. The exercise is scheduled to be conducted from July 12th to August 2nd. It is a biennial multinational exercise hosted by Royal Australian Air Force. Over 140 aircraft and 400 military personnel of various air forces of 20 countries will participate in this exercise. 77% of the people in India feel satisfied with democracy in the country, said a survey by an American think tank, PEW. India has the highest satisfaction rate among major economies. The survey highlights a strong positive sentiment towards democratic governance in India compared to other large economies, reflecting a robust engagement with democratic processes and institutions. Today is World Population Day. The day is observed on 11th of July every year to focus on the challenges and opportunities caused by the rising population. It was first marked on 11th July 1990 in more than 90 countries, and this year the theme is Leave No One Behind, Count Everyone. DD India's Siddharth Bhardwaj has more.
There are about 7.9 billion people in the world, as per the United Nations data in 2021. It took hundreds of thousands of years for the world population to grow to 1 billion, and then in just some hundreds of years, it grew 7-fold. But despite this, population is considered as a resource and not a burden. World Population Day is observed on July 11 every year, which aims to raise awareness about the issues of global population and its impact on the society. It was established by United Nations and highlights importance of population-related concerns. This year's World Population Day theme echoes the sentiment of leave no one behind, count everyone. India is world's largest country in terms of population, but this has never hampered the pace at which the nation is progressing in various sectors. During a virtual meet on World Population Day in New Delhi, Union Health Minister Jagat Prakash Nadda emphasized the need for collaborative efforts between centre and states to ensure that women have the right to make family planning decisions and are not burdened by unwanted pregnancies. He also stated that we need to work towards maintaining low total fertility rate or TFR in the states that have already achieved it and work towards achieving in other states and also unveil Sugam Model Initiative for family planning.
हम सब लोग अपने TFR को रिड्यूस करने में काफ़ी हद तक सफल हुए हैं। हमारे नेशनल हेल्थ फैमिली सर्वे का जो NHFS का रिपोर्ट पहले का आया और अभी का आया है, उसमें हम सबको एक तरीके से संतोष भी है और एक तरीके से हमारी कमिटमेंट, जिस कमिटमेंट के साथ हम आगे बढ़े, उसका हमको रास्ता भी दिख रहा है.
Also present at the event was Minister of State for Health and Family Welfare, Anupriya Patel, who urged everyone to make this campaign a great success. World Population Day focuses on the challenges and opportunities caused by rising population. It is a reminder to address population-related concerns and work towards a sustainable future. Siddharth Bhardwaj's report for DD India.
A professional ballet dancer, Darion Ernesto Darias, with almost 15 years of experience, found a passion in breeding bees. He now shares the art of classical dance on stage with his environmental activism. Take a look. Darius, who has been raising bees for 5 years, said that he's created a small network to fortify the hives at home. The dancer estimates that today between 10 and 15 people breed these bees in Havana. In the country, he added, there must be about 100 beekeepers who as a rule do not have more than 2 to 5 hives. That's all for this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles, X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at DD India Live. And for those on the go, you can catch all the latest news and updates on our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. So we will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.